Yeah.
There was, I think it was maybe the introduction of Windows 98, I believe it was at a Comdex. And Bill Gates was on stage doing this big introduction. And, of course, he had all these effects and the rolling videos and music and all that. And all this stuff in a little dark room behind the stage was coming off Macintoshes. But I happened to know a guy who was working on that presentation who was back there in that little dark room. And he came to me afterward and he said, "Could you believe we're doing this on a Mac?" Oh, yeah. Well, of course, I mean, the first brilliant media machine was the Amiga.
Yep,
I remember games on the Amiga were light years ahead of anything else on the Apple or the PC. I mean, the Amiga graphics and sound were extraordinary in the early days.
I loved using a video toaster. I loved doing.
Oh, yeah. You know Toaster, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great... Oh, yeah. I know those guys very well.
Yeah, I remember I was watching an episode where you were interviewing some people. I think it was for the Amiga 3000.
Yeah. No, the Toaster was a brilliant... I mean, that was the first time you could actually use your computer to do video and television.
Yeah.
It was with the Toaster. But look, think of that, too. I mean, when that Toaster board came out, that was about $5,000 for the card.
Yeah.
And as you say, in your $400 laptop, you can do video editing all you want.
Yeah.
The original computer museum was a Digital Equipment Corporation outside Boston. That's a history. I mean, the guy who ran DEC, DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, was like the rest of us. He collected all this junk, and he had a garage full of stuff. And he actually went to somebody in Boston and said, "We should turn this into a museum." And the museum started in his house. And then at some point they took all this junk and they moved it over into this computer museum in downtown Boston. But they went out of business, and then they moved all that stuff out here to California. And during the dot-com bust in about 2002, when lots of companies went out of business and there was all kinds of empty offices, they were able to buy this huge building for like $1 million, whereas before it was worth $10 million, and that became the home of the Computer Museum here. That's different, by the way. There's also something called the Tech Museum here in San Jose, which is different from the Computer Museum. The Computer Museum has great stuff. And in fact, if you go to the Computer Museum, they actually have they have old pieces of video from my shows explaining some of the stuff. Well, that's the real challenge, and I think, as you suggested earlier, that was, I think, one of the things I'm proud of what we do with Computer Chronicles. I mean, that's the whole point, is how do you explain complicated things to people who don't have the ability or the time or the patience to deal with complicated stuff. And in the early days, you really had to know how to, take the computer apart and figure out an awful lot of things, and you had to install, drivers and flip dip switches and on and on and on and on.
Yeah, and even breaking that down to semi-complicated talk is still hard,
Yes, absolutely. That's a real challenge. I mean, the good news in a way is, technology really has gotten so much simpler than it was. I remember there was a time, we were talking to, I think it was Macworld magazine at the time, about becoming one of the sponsors of our show, and I had a very interesting conversation with the guy who was the editor of Macworld. And he said, we're really worried about our business. And at that time, I mean, computer magazines were really big. And he said, I used to be in the photography magazine business, and there used to be 30 magazines about photography, and now there's about 2, because cameras, you don't have to know anything about a camera anymore. You press the button. In the old days, you had to know about aperture and this and film speeds and so on and so forth. And he said, when things get simple, nobody needs magazines anymore. Nobody needs these things anymore. And to some degree, that's happened with computers, or most technology, which is it is relatively simple. Yeah. Even if you're a gamer, you don't have to know a lot, to take advantage of most of the stuff. But it's really, really difficult to. I always thought of myself as like a UN translator, translating geek talk into normal talk, so that people could understand what the hell you were talking about when you had to deal with complicated subjects. It was another interesting example of that is there were. When we would have guests on the show, it was classic. If we'd have on some mid-level guy who was a programmer or a developer of some sort, he could come in and whiz through demonstrations and explain everything. The real problem was when the CEO would come on as a guest, and he didn't know how to do anything. And he had to bring some guy who behind the scenes, press over here and press that. And And so even within the industry, the knowledge was really at a mid-level somewhere with the guys who actually did stuff. But often the people running these businesses really didn't understand the technology either. They understood the business and the sales side of it.
Yeah.
So it's always been that way.